Hello YouTube, it's Hauntown here, and today I'll be reviewing Heartworm, a retro survival horror game that shows you what would happen if you threw Silent Hill and Fatal Frame in a cauldron while adding a dash of Resident Evil for good measure. The story has you play as Sam, a young grief-stricken woman who decides to go find a creepy house she heard about on the internet, which supposedly allows you to come in contact with the dead. Her search leads her to said house's attic, and after walking through a weird door, the weirdness is cranked up to 11 as she finds herself lost in an isolated little town near the mountains, where she starts coming across increasingly surreal and terrifying places and entities. The game's narrative hits deep as it delves into philosophical questions about grief, existentialism, the meaning of life and human struggle, as well as the damage caused by simply refusing to let go of things that belong to the past, and fully resonated with me as I slowly realized how some troubles and worries reflected my own futile attempts to fully understand the human condition. Also, bonus points for the game incorporating a good chunk of cinematics, which truly elevated the experience. Heartworm's creepy setting feels part Silent Hill, part Resident Evil as a combination of eeriness and intensity, and even goes so far as to incorporate the door transitions of the early Resident Evil games, which nearly brought a tear to my eye. The fantastically pre-rendered backgrounds do an incredible job of breathing unholy life to the various areas you'll get to explore, which range from the aforementioned creepy town to a deceptively idyllic forest, all the way to some full-on mind-bending places that challenge Euclidean geometry to its limits. On that note, the game's map view is really cool and very helpful, since it marks every area and room by name, notes down doors, and also applies a grainy overlay to rooms where you still have things to do or find, thus making the process of finding everything easier. The aforementioned places are not just unsettling to see, but also dangerous to traverse on account of the various monstrosities that prowl them, which demonstrated a satisfying diversity in terms of type, including things like these grainy zombie-like entities, a bunch of sylvan dogs that I hated to my very core, as well as mannequins that came alive, among other horrifying creatures. Thankfully, Sam is not helpless against these abominations and can fight back, which is where Fatal Frame's influence comes into the mix, since her way of dealing with her enemies comes in the form of an old camera which she uses to stagger or kill them. Said camera is also used to collect some optional possum plushies you'll come across, so keep that in mind. My one complaint in relation to combat is that, other than the dogs, no other enemy ever made me feel as if I was under serious threat due to how slow they were, which made it very easy for me to dodge them when I didn't want to fight. Now, this wouldn't be a proper survival horror game without puzzles, and I'm mostly happy to say that Heartworm is packed with them. Here you'll get your classic environmental conundrums, which require logical thinking to solve, as well as the standard process of figuring out which key goes to which lock and which item should be used on which part of the setting. My one complaint in relation to this is the goddamn piano puzzle, which requires of you to be psychic in order to go into the developer's mind so that you can figure out the solution, since I couldn't find any actual hint in the game, which I hated to my core. God, I despise it when this happens in these games. Anyway, another complaint of mine, though this one is minor, is that Heartworm didn't have that many bosses to duke it out with, though the ones it had were awesome and the fights were quite fun, so that's just me nitpicking and being a little bitch. Special mention goes to the music that permeated the game's safe rooms, which was sublime. I mean, just listen to this thing. Serenity. On the last note, I did come across two issues that will probably need to be patched. First, the game would always show this grey line at the bottom whenever the protagonist spoke, which I assume is related to the fact that I had the subtitles turned off, but the system still opted to demonstrate the subtitle background bar. Said line would remain until I changed rooms, so I consider it a minor nuisance, but still something to fix. The second and more prominent issue is related to these jumping monsters that, for some reason, simply couldn't hit me no matter how hard they tried, making them Heartworm stormtroopers. I mean, you have to admit that this scene over here is somewhat hilarious. They kind of look like they're cheering me on or something. This actually further enhanced the lack of enemy threat I mentioned previously, since, aside from the dogs, these things were the only other creatures I felt could have made me sweat a bit. In any case, I'm not sure what's causing this, but definitely something to patch up. All in all, the 4 hours it took me to complete Heartworm with 1 out of 3 endings, while on the short side of things, were nostalgically enjoyable. This truly truly comes off like a labor of love from a developer for whom the story feels personal, becoming one of those rare cases where a game's narrative also provides food for thought on top of showering you with wave after wave of gameplay nostalgia. If you're one of those gamers that reminisces fondly about the golden era of survival horror games back in the 90s, Heartworm is a must-play since it carries an honest fragment of that time's soul. On the other hand, if you're part of the younger generation and just want to know what the fuss is all about when it comes to that golden era, the good news is that Heartworm offers some cool quality of life improvements in the form of optional modern controls so that you don't have to deal with the clunkier retro ones, thus making it appealing to younger audiences as well. Heartworm is a love letter to the survival horror classics. It's not a perfect survival horror game, but a very decent entry in the genre that deserves a spot in your library of old school terrors. On a scale of S to F, Heartworm secures a solid B.